I have some bad news to report. We're going to Un-GigaStack, the retro rack. What is a GigaStack, you might ask? Well, let me tell you. In the late 90s into the 2000s, it was common for enterprise networking equipment to have these GBIC ports. Stands for Gigabit Interface Converter. You can get these GBIC modules to let you connect different physical layers. So this one is for fiber. We got one here for RJ45. 1 gig speeds were just coming on the scene, and it was really expensive. So it was pretty typical to have one or two 1 gigabit ports over here, and all your ports that your workstations and other equipment would connect to, they're at 10 or 100 megabit speeds. So it was pretty common to interconnect all the networking devices at that faster speed. So a bunch of 100 megabit connections over here can talk to the ones that happen to be plugged in over here over a 1 gig link. And Cisco came out with a proprietary but more affordable option called GigaStack. So you'd buy some of these cheaper GigaStack modules. They've got two what look like FireWire ports on the front. They just happen to be the same physical connector. But they're definitely not FireWire. You had to buy special cables from Cisco that you would plug in to these things. It's my understanding that you definitely do not want to use a FireWire cable for this, and I think even worse, using one of these Cisco cables as a FireWire cable with your real FireWire devices is going to blow your crap up. So you get your GigaStack GBICs in there, and you start plugging stuff in. And even better, they've got 2 ports. So with just 3 modules and 2 cables, you can interconnect 3 devices. GigaStacking has basically been living rent-free in my head for years now. So of course, when I built out my retro rack, I GigaStacked it. It's real stacked. But you know what they say, it's not the size of the stack, it's how you use it. I absolutely love how this looks, but there are a bunch of downsides. Namely, it's taken up a lot of space in the rack. So I'm sad to say, it's time for an upgrade. And I think this Catalyst 3560G Series PoE 48 port monster is going to do the trick. So I'm going to go over all the problems my current GigaStack switch setup has. We'll see if this thing even works. We'll pull that out of the rack, get everything rewired up, and then as a final hurrah, we'll construct what is probably the largest GigaStack the world has seen in the last decade. Let's get into it. Let's start in here, go over the current setup. What I'm hoping to solve are a few problems. Space. This takes up quite a bit of rack space. The second one is sound. I effectively turn on all 3 of these items whenever I'm using the retro rack, and this egg switch in particular is ridiculously loud for what it is. And I think the 48 port switch is going to be much quieter, so that's another goal. And then capability. So I'm delivering inline power to some Cisco IP phones with this thing. I don't have normal PoE anywhere else in this rack, but some of the phones, like this one with the color screen, need normal PoE. That 48 port monster delivers both. So there's nothing inherently wrong with the GigaStacking. I'm going to miss it dearly, unfortunately. But this whole setup just isn't really working for me anymore. Now, I love how it looks. It's kind of an iconic part of the channel, I think. So I half think I'm going to bring it back after I hate how that other thing ends up looking. But this isn't going away forever. I plan to have many more retro racks in the future. I don't have the space in this house, but someday there will be more than one retro rack, and one of them is going to be GigaStacked. So this is the core retro rack network. At the top we have a terminal server that lets me remotely manage all these items and the servers over the retro rack network itself. Then we've got the VXR router. He's not going anywhere. That's the main router. And then of course all the switches. At the top we've got this Catalyst 3550 series egg switch. So these are all 1 gig ports. You can see it's got a bunch of GBICs on it and 2 RJ45s over there. This is the only 1 gig switch in this whole stack. Well, I should say, these guys over here have 2 1 gig ports, of course, but this is all 10 100 over here. Going lower, we have another 3550 series switch. This is just ye old 24 port switch. And then down here we have something special. Down here we have a Catalyst 3500 series XL. Let me get the GigaStack out of the way here. And it's delivering inline power. Inline power is something Cisco cooked up before PoE got standardized. And I have a bunch of Cisco gear that requires inline power, like this Cisco 7960 IP phone over there. This will turn on whenever I flip on the retro rack network, of course. And I've got a bunch of these Cisco AeroNet things. Regular viewers will know that the retro rack actually has Wi-Fi. And we also got to talk about space. This egg switch is a U.5, which is exceedingly annoying. It leaves you a gap. I've used it for these wires, but obviously that's not required. So getting rid of this thing immediately gives me half a U back. So the plan, I think, is we're going to pull all this out. We're going to put that 48 port switch right here, and we'll put in a 1U patch panel, I think, to start. And then I'm going to get, how much am I going to get back? I'm going to get 4.5 U back. That's at least 2 pretty big servers. And we had a Canon Chloe event the other night. She got her very first visit to the server room. She's really good with cables and computers and everything, but I've been kind of waiting for her to get big enough so she didn't fit in this like void area that's back there. Through this little gap, there's like 2 or 3 square feet of extra void space that's unreachable, really. It's just the way the basement was laid out. She, of course, immediately went in there. So what are you going to do? Let's start by taking a look at this Catalyst 3560G PoE 48 port switch. Another huge benefit as each of these ports is 10, 100, and 1 gig networking. Previously, anything I wanted on a gig, I was just flowing through the egg switch. Now everything can just plug into this one switch. Now, with more modern stuff, even if they claim to do 10 megabit, I have found that they won't auto-negotiate or get down to that properly. This thing isn't exactly modern. It was actually built 20 years ago. And because it's Cisco, I'm pretty sure these ports are going to behave just fine for me when I need to use 10 megabit stuff. This particular unit was manufactured December 21st, 2006. I think they came out in 2004, and in fact they just went end of support back in 2021. This big dog was donated to the channel by Gerald. It got taken out of service somewhere in Ohio, as I recall, so huge thanks to him. And I do know it more or less works. I powered it up last night, and actually as I was walking it over here, there was a screw I could hear banging around in there. So I opened it up, and I'm really glad I did. As I was walking with it, this mystery screw could have ended up somewhere that caused all sorts of problems. And you'll notice it's a little dirty on the top. It's like paint splatter or something. I wonder if that'll all comes off really easy with this plastic tool. I wonder if a little cleaner might get rid of that. Oh yeah, it's cleaning up real nice. Very easy. It wasn't even that dirty. It just had some paint splatters on it. Usually something like that is a pretty telltale sign it wasn't racked up, and there's some other indications. It's got all 4 rubber feet still on there. You wouldn't typically want that in a rack situation because pretty tight tolerances and other stuff bumps up against it. But I'm a little confused because it came with the rack ears. These were on there. I had to take them off to take the lid off the other night. So that's a mystery. We will want to remove these feet though. Wonder how accommodating they're going to be. Ooh, these are good ones. There we go. Get all 4 of those off. When it first starts up, it's very loud, but then eventually the software kicks in and the temperature sensors start getting monitored and it revs way down. So I'll show you what it sounds like with no noise canceling when the fans are revved way up, and then I'll come back when they're back to their normal operating speed. It booted up. One downside is it takes 4 to 5 minutes. It does really extensive boot up tests, but I think we'll be able to turn all that off. I fired this up last night and it essentially has no configuration. It does have a hostname, rack slot 5. I like that. And it is going off and trying to do some default profile init load from the flash, but those files are missing. So I looked at the configuration and it's basically blank. I'm going to factory reset it and not show you in case there's something in there I missed and I exposed something. So let's do that now. So we're going to get into enable mode, and there was no password set on this thing. We're going to erase the startup config. Yes, that's good. Okay, and then I was reading it's also a good idea to delete any VLAN data. I didn't even check if that thing was there. It must have been. So let's reload it now, or reboot the switch. It does this while it's loading iOS, I think. iOS is the operating system that these Cisco switches run. It does some very quick, fast tests here, and then the fans rev down. And these tests that it's starting now are the slow part. It's up and appears to have been factory reset. By default, the hostname of a Cisco switch is switch, and the default for a router is router. Pretty reasonable. So we should be able to get into privilege mode and configure from terminal. And I think it's hostname. I think we'll call this one PoE switch 1, just so I can distinguish from all the others. And I was reading the Cisco docs, and I can set boot mode to fast, which should skip all that stuff. So let's give it a shot. Boot fast. Didn't like that. I must be reading some documentation from a different version of iOS. Let's see. Doing a show version here. I'm running version 15.02 in parentheses SE4. I do not like the Cisco versioning scheme. Yeah, I don't know. Seems like I should just be able to configure from terminal and issue a boot fast, but I don't have that option in my version of iOS. And this is odd. You know, what do we got here? I was about to complain that Cisco's usually really specific in its documentation for what versions of iOS and what device you're dealing with. And it's not in the dock itself, but in the URL, I'm looking at information for a Catalyst 2960, which is clearly not what I have. I will consult the official Cisco Catalyst 3560 documentation with my good friend here, the Cisco documentation guy. I wonder how that guy's doing. I hope he's still alive. Well, I don't see anything in here about speeding up that post test, so we're just going to live with it. I've spent enough time on this. I've got this spreadsheet where I keep track of everything that's going on in the retro rack, because there's no way I'm going to remember it. And all of our switches that we're going to pull are these guys, and I have some information about them. The management IP, the host name. This is the port that they're connected to on the terminal server, that thing at the top. And then the PDU port. There is a managed power distribution unit at the back of this rack. I can remotely from in here turn those items on. And another big win here is we're going to get some PDU ports back because we're effectively getting rid of 2 items. So I think we're going to let this thing take over egg 1's situation. So what did I call this? PoE switch 1. And these guys are no longer relevant, RIP. So let's get this thing fully configured, do some quality of life stuff, and we'll get to work here re-racking. So let's get in here. I think the first thing we want to do is give this thing a default gateway. So we'll do default gateway. This is that router in the retro rack. Clearly, I don't remember how to do this. Round 2. Let's get into enable mode. Let's configure the terminal. And in here, IP does have a default gateway option. So let's try that again. It liked that. And then we're going to configure the VLAN 1 interface. This is going to be the management interface for this thing. So basically, I'll be able to ping out on the network for this switch at the address I set it to, and it'll respond. So we're going to do interface VLAN 1. Okay. And we're going to give it an IP address of the old egg switch, RIP. And then we're going to get out of here. And you see this annoying logging that's happening. It'll log any change you make. So we're going to do one quality of life change. Back in conf t, we're going to do the console line, which I'm attached to now. And it's critical to say logging synchronous. Much better experience. So notice how before, when this log line showed up, my cursor was at the end. And when you get a lot of those flowing in, and sometimes you just get logging events in general about what the switch is up to while you're typing. And it's really annoying. You kind of lose track. You can still keep typing, but it's hard mentally to keep up with. And now what happens is when a log line shows up, it gives me a carriage return basically. And we're going to write this out, which means I'm persisting all the settings I just made. So on these Cisco machines, everything I'm changing happens immediately to the live config. But if I was to reboot, I would lose all that. And so writing this out saves it, persists it, and so the next time I reboot, it'll still be there. We are going to need to power up the GigaStacked switches one last time so that I can make some configuration changes to the router so I don't get locked out of the network. I'll explain that in a moment. But while this is in here, let me show you one of the huge PoE benefits. This is a Cisco 7960 IP phone, and it requires that old style Cisco proprietary inline power. And if we plug this in here, it boots up. So that's inline power. And here I've got a Cisco 7965 IP phone. These are the 2 styles of IP phone I happen to own. This one cannot use inline power. It wants actual standard PoE. If I plug that one in, it also starts up. So with one 48 port switch, I can do all the different IP phone PoEs I happen to need at this moment. This is a massive win for me. This one's got a sick wallpaper. With my old setup, I could plug in inline power phones no problem, but this one I would have to use a PoE injector. So that was a huge pain. Don't have to worry about that anymore. Here's an example of that logging I was talking about. So as I'm plugging these phones in, you're getting console logs about power granted and detected and everything. So you can turn all this off. I like to leave it on so I can see what the switch is doing. And I like to leave it on logging synchronous so it's easy to deal with while the switch is active. This is a little Go app I use to control my PDU. I've got that PDU on the back. It's on my home network. This machine here is on both networks, the home network 192.168.1 and the RetroRack network 10.0.0.0. I'll show you how this machine is connected to the RetroRack, but long story short, when the RetroRack is entirely off, I can turn machines on from this machine because it's on both networks. And one nice thing is that 2 of these switches are going away. So I'm going to get 2 PDU outlets back. And with that terminal server I was showing you earlier, I can connect to all the items in the RetroRack. So this is the router. And if we do a show run, look at its configuration, it is connected up to the egg switch through Gigabit Ethernet 01. And the critical piece here is that the media type is set to GBIC. So on the back of that router, there are several interfaces, and they support both GBIC and RJ45. I've got mine on GBIC because I was messing around and being fancy, and it's connected over fiber. I don't have a fiber GBIC to put in this 48 port switch over here. So if I was to pull all that stuff out, put it back in, I'd have no way to connect the router to the switch, and therefore I would not be able to manage any of this stuff because my machine here is connected to the RetroRack and this router and the terminal server through those GigaStacked switches. So we need to change this. I'm going to change the media type, and we're going to lose access briefly, and then we'll go in there and fix it, make sure everything's cool, and we'll start ripping out the GigaStack. So configure from terminal. We're going to configure that interface. And if we do a media type and ask all of its options, there's 2, of course, the GBIC or the RJ45. We are going to set the media type to RJ45, and I believe we're going to lose access. Why is this still working? Oh, I know why. The computer I'm working on is plugged into the egg switch. The terminal server is also plugged in at the end of the day to the egg switch. I don't think I actually had to worry about this in hindsight, but it had to happen anyway. Let's get in there. I have no idea why I thought that was going to be a problem. It's funny when you get this little idea in your head and then you think you need to do that thing and you stop thinking critically about it. To recap, this is the terminal server. It gives me serial port access to all these devices. It is plugged in to this switch network, it's plugged in at the end of the day to one of these things. My computer in the other room is also plugged in. I think it's this one right here. And I was worried about like losing access to this, which is plugged in this way. And what we just did was, oh, forgot about that. Yeah, this thing's taped on. What we just did is the GBIC port this is plugged into, I've switched it over to RJ45, so we'll use an RJ45 cable into the new switch. But none of that matters because as long as this is plugged into the network and my machine is plugged into the network, I can access this thing over the serial port. I wasn't thinking about that right. Anyway, I'm probably not explaining it very well. What we're going to do is start pulling all this out, and we'll get the new switch in, hook everything up, power it on, and I'll still be able to talk, because of this terminal server, to all the items over serial. This is a sad night. It's a shell of its former self. But the march of technology waits for no man. Oddly enough, this is a pretty historically accurate journey we're going on. I'm sure many of you pulled a bunch of these GBIC switches out when the 1 gig stuff got more affordable. I don't know how much this cost back in the day. Many, many thousands of dollars if I had to guess. But basically, 1 gig was getting cheaper and you didn't need these GBICs anymore. And so we're going through the same progression with the retro rack. Let's get the rack ears on this and we'll get it in there. The IT gods blessed me on this one because I have the rack ears. However, it is going to kind of poke out a little bit from the rack. Some of the other switches were doing that. That is not a big deal in practice, but it bothers me down here in my basement. And that's just the way these rack ears were designed. So there's little notches coming out here and they fit into these slots nicely like that. There's only so much you can do. So we'll rack this up and I'll tell you about my stupid patch panel situation. Got the switch in there, and the idea is you put a 24 port patch panel here and a 24 port on the bottom and they can loop over. I could have used this one, I guess, but I'm trying to save space. I think I can get away with just 24 ports and not even use all these. So that'll leave me room to expand, I think. And also this one doesn't make sense for this particular switch because a bunch of wires would have to cross. I mean, it's totally doable. It's just not how I wanted to do it. And so I thought I had a 24 port patch panel. I have a 16 port patch panel. That's not good enough. So for the sake of making progress tonight, we're going to steal this 24 port patch panel. Looks like I've only got 5 items going into, this is my home lab network, my home network. This is a USW Pro from Ubiquiti, big ass 48 port PoE switch. This thing is awesome. And yeah, I'm going to pull this out and steal it. It looks like 2 of these items are actually online. And whatever this is not. So should be a pretty straightforward experience here. Well, it was going to be straightforward. I've passed through one of these direct attach copper cables. So this is probably a pretty critical piece of my network. So we'll do this quickly. And get that back where he belongs. That's probably one of these servers down here. Got everything wired back up. This was probably one of these items in the rack. So that's 10 gig connectivity. And then these yellow cables are going to the iDRAC, the remote management of these servers down here. So that's no big deal. Everything's hooked back up. And I ordered another one of those 24 port patch panels on Amazon. So I'll get that back installed later. That's why I thought I had one. It's down here. I'm using it for the IBM stuff. That's okay. So this thing is missing a bunch of the actual keystones, which is fine because obviously I have a bunch here. So I'm going to pull this out, disconnect everything, and then let's see if this is going to even fit. Not quite, actually. So this VXR is on a universal rail kit. So it's got this little shelf it's on, and I'm going to have to lower this as much as I can, which I already tried to do. That was one of the benefits of having that half U there. I think we can make it work. So we're gonna fill this thing up with keystones after I get these little patch cables out of here. Hopefully I have enough of them. I didn't have enough. I was 5 short. I think I've depleted my supply of black keystones, so I'll have to restock. So I'll steal 5 from the double wide that I'm not going to use anymore. This came with the keystones. Definitely buy them that way. They are significantly harder to get out than they are to get in. So I'll finish this up and get this panel in the rack. It's no GigaStack, but it's not bad. And look at all this room for activities. I think I've got everything wired back up, and I was really surprised. I'd never actually counted before. 21 out of these 24 ports have something connected to them. So what that means in practice is definitely going to have another 24 port patch panel down here for the rest of the ports. And then we've got 2U for a server and another U for, well, Another tiny server if we want, or something else. As expected, it's definitely not as cool looking as the previous setup, but I think it'll be worth it in the end. Let's go remotely power all this back on and see if we can talk to stuff. Looking at my little app to control that PDU on the back. And we need to edit some of these items. So let's go look at this thing. So AG1 is now called PoE Switch 1. Yeah, I think I can just remove these. I think it's smart enough to do that. Yep. We got 2 free ports called unknown. Now, let's turn it back on. The router, the terminal server, the new switch, and that should be it. I'm waiting for the network to come up, and that aggregation switch, when I used to turn that on, I could hear it kick on in here, and I can't hear anything from in here. I just walked over there, and even with the fans at full tilt, it's like nothing compared to all 3 of those old switches that used to be on. I guess they're not old, they're all kind of the same age, but that 48 port switch, way quieter than the old setup. So I can't reach the router. It's on, but I don't have connectivity to it. But I went in there and I looked, and the link light is not on. So that GBIC stuff we did didn't have the right effect, apparently. However, I can ping the terminal server, which means the VM I'm using here in my home lab rack, this is kind of confusing. I have a machine that can reach the network from here, is what I'm saying. And I can telnet in, and I can administer the terminal server, which is good. Now, via the terminal server, I'm going to get onto the serial console of the router. And it is in ROMmon, which means that it didn't boot fully for some reason. Why would that be? I wonder if I can tell it to reboot from here. I think I can issue a reset to tell it to restart. This has never happened in the history of me having this router. So hopefully something didn't go wrong. Yeah, it crashed at boot again. Uncorrectable ECC parity error. Oh, cannot determine first file name on device slot 0. Nothing I've done would cause a problem with this particular router. That's pretty interesting. Let's power cycle it. So let's turn it off. I'll wait 30 seconds and I'll turn it back on. I think it's booting. It did complain about one of its port adapters. Those are the slots on the front. Had an improper insertion. That is somewhat concerning. Oops. I'm in Unix mode. There we go. It thinks it's up. So, can we talk to it? And we can. That's probably some foreshadowing for that thing having a lot of problems later. So I believe the whole network stack is up. I can talk to the router. I can talk to the terminal server. I can talk to the switch. I think everything's good to go. That has been a concern of mine. So I only power this stuff up when I need it. But this stuff was built to be powered on and left on forever. So I don't know how friendly these things are to all these power cycles I'm putting them through. Not to say they're not capable, but there must be some max limit on the amount of power cycles they were designed to experience, and it's got to be lower. That would not have been the core goal of the engineers building these things. They're going for uptime, not necessarily number of cycles. So I don't know if that's going to be a problem. Now that that PoE switch is so quiet and I'm running one item instead of 3 switches, I might start leaving them on. That's tempting. One more test tonight. These 2 ports right here, theoretically, go back to that switch we just hooked up, assuming I plugged everything in correctly. And we should have inline power and PoE. So this is the inline power test. This one takes a while. Yep, there we go. And it's probably pretty comical to imagine this, but I'm out of Ethernet cables. So I'm going to buy like a ton more. Anyway, here's regular PoE test. This one's pretty quick, I think. Yeah. You see how it says configuring VLAN in the back there? These things take forever to start up because of my VLAN configuration, I think. And by configuration, I mean I don't really have a VLAN configuration. You saw I was setting up VLAN 1 as my management configuration. There is a correct way to set these phones up and have them on their own VLAN, and then on the back, they've got a port for your computer to be plugged in, even though there's one Ethernet jack coming in from the switch. Another goal of having just one switch in there that controls the whole rack is we're going to start getting into proper VLAN configuration in the future. It's configuring its IP. It'll take a minute, but let's see if these things actually work. The Khloe Kardashian phone came up pretty quick. I do have a dial tone. The older one is still thinking about itself. Clab Retro, number 102, finally came to life. Let's call him. Oh yeah. I think Chloe's got like a cooler ringtone. Never mind. I don't know. It works. Inline power and PoE. I cannot stress enough how excellent this is. While we're here, let's make a big ass GigaStack. I have it in the superior full duplex star configuration. Very important for a big growing enterprise like mine. Even though that's not entirely true, I ran out of modules. Let me explain that. There's two ways to connect two GigaStack modules together. Point to point or daisy chain. I'm doing point to point right here, and it gives you the full duplex. However, it is totally valid to do something like this. This one has been daisy chained into this one, which in turn goes to the rest of the stack. When you daisy chain, you get half duplex, meaning you're only going to get read and write one direction at any given time rather than simultaneously on the line. You'll get the maximum speed with a bunch of point-to-point connections. This is called a star configuration because it's kind of, the points of the star coming out of the main aggregation switch. That's why each of these is coming back into the one switch. But I'm not really all the way there. I'm 2 modules short, so 2 of these are sharing connections, which I think is not going to be the full speed. Who would have thought only owning 10 GigaStack modules would not be enough for my needs down here? These were the 3 items we just pulled out of the rack, and when I originally set them up last year, the egg switch is running something called Cisco CMS, the Cisco Cluster Management Suite. And it is an excellent Java app that lets you see the switches in the stack. Cisco has the concept of clustering switches together. It's not necessarily related to GigaStack. The GigaStack stuff is the physical connectivity that gets these things all wired up, but you can cluster them together and manage them in that cluster UI. So let's make a big old GigaStack cluster. Each switch is going to need an IP, and then we should be able to access the egg switch, which is hosting that management suite software, and add the additional items to the cluster and see them all in one spot, theoretically. The ones we pulled out already have IPs, of course, so I'm going to go one by one and power these other mystery switches up, and I'll assign them IPs, and I'll be back when we're ready to fire the whole thing up. Kind of nervous. It's going to be really, really loud. Okay, they are all on the same network, theoretically, assuming I did everything right, and I wrote all my changes out. So, I'm going to figure out the power situation. We'll try to flip them all on at once. I think that'll be fun. Remember how I just took over Egg 1's old IP for that new switch? And I mentioned maybe that'll come back to haunt us? It will. I think I'm actually going to make an adjustment. I'm going to change the IP on Egg 1, and then we're going to plug this whole thing into the retro rack so that I can use it in a Windows XP VM, because that's going to be my best bet of getting that old Java app to work. So I'll do that real quick, and then we'll figure out the power. There is a whole lot of depth variance to these various items I have. So I just powered most of these on, and individually, they're totally fine, except for this one. This is going to be not noise canceled. Get ready for the egg switch. It's actually not as bad as I remember it. Maybe I've been lying to you this whole time. I wasn't kidding when I said I'm out of Ethernet cords and I'm too lazy to make more. This is how we're going to connect it to the retro rack. As far as power goes, I have 7 things to plug in, and I'm going to turn them on all at once for comedic effect. I wonder, let's get a gauge for how much current these are pulling. Let's look at this one. So a theoretical max of 1.5 amps. Am I at 50 or 60 hertz? According to a Reddit post from 14 years ago, a typical US AC circuit is at 60 hertz. Spot checked a couple more, and that's pretty typical. So theoretically, if all these power on at once, we could, for a brief moment, pull 7 amps. And I'm way overthinking this because I'm just having fun dicking around. A 15 amp typical US 120 volt circuit could handle that, but there's a lot of other stuff that this thing is plugged into. In fact, I need to do a little investigation. I don't know what else this breaker is tied into. I know it's a lot of stuff though. My computer just over there, I think 1 or 2 other rooms. Anyway, we're not going to use that one. Brought in a dedicated 20 amp line from the other room on my extension cord that's probably rated for 13 amps or whatever. But that'll be all right. If this thing pulls in more than 13 amps, we've got bigger problems. I think I found all the power cables I need. And then I'm fresh out of power strips. So we'll use this guy. I need to stock up on the basics. Power strips and Ethernet cables. This is a Triplite 20 amp PDU. A viewer named Mark donated 2 of these to the channel. He's local. We had a coffee and he dropped these off for me. I actually have an identical one running my home lab rack at the moment. But there's a problem. It's got this big old chonker. But that won't stop us. We've got the temporary use only adapter. This is going to be very temporary, I can assure you. Right before I filmed that clip, I was doing a test fit. When I pulled this thing out, and I whapped the ever-living crap out of the camera. I cannot believe I did not bust the lens. The camera turned off. I hit it so hard. This video almost got like way more expensive. Initial thoughts. It looks awesome. I've had all this gear for a really long time. I had big plans to get this all in the retro rack, but it just takes up way too much space. So eventually we'll have to get multiple retro racks. Everything's flowing into the PDU back there, making this an even better experience. And the best part, this thing is actually going to tell us how many amps we're pulling. And I bet it's going to be like 2. And all of this was a waste of time, but we're having fun. Pulled the patented Collab Retro shop switch thing over here. We're going to plug it into the circuit so that we can get the full experience. I have a dream of like selling these, you know? I feel like there's at least one of you that would want one of these bad boys. I built this. That seems like that would be illegal though. Also, I didn't really build it very well. I have to do a V2 on this one. At least give you a part kit, you know? On my website, just show, hey, here's the parts. If you buy these parts and do this, except don't do that, you know, follow your own path. I'm not telling you to do it, but that's how you would do it. This switch is plugged in. Now we'll plug in the GigaStack. This one of those outlets that has a light in it. If there's power going to the circuit and it's off, which is not quite what I was expecting. I think it's so like you're in the middle of the night and you can find your switch. Anyway, fun little feature. This is probably the largest GigaStacked switch setup assembled in over a decade. We're witnessing history here. We'll see what we got. And my 2 amp prediction was exactly right. All the GigaStack modules initializing. They go orange when you start them up. All the switches doing their thing while they start up and do their post-test. I mean, I don't know if it works yet, but we might have a MegaGigaStack on our hands here. Like I was saying, this was always the dream, to GigaStack as much stuff as I possibly could in the retro rack. At least we're doing it in here. I can ping any of them with a point-to-point connection like this. But where I've shared an adapter like that with 2 ports, that doesn't work. I don't think that's a legit setup. So what I'm going to have to do, because I didn't have enough modules for point-to-point everywhere, is I am going to have to daisy chain. So I'm going to assess the best way to wire this up, and I'll show you where I get. Making some progress. So the switches on the bottom, they have a point-to-point right here. And then this one is the start of the daisy chain. So there's the egg switch, goes into here. You can see both of those are green. It daisy chains up to here. This one can see it. and then the link breaks here. These two appear to be connected, and these two don't see anything. So it's possible that this module's bad, the cables are bad, I'm not sure, I'm gonna play around. This is interesting. See how it's saying it's got full 1 gig? Those are green, and they're not being weird. If I begin the daisy chain up to this one, check out those lights. They don't like that. Let's try a different cable. Different cable. Doesn't like that either. Let's see if it likes this top one. Yeah, it does. Or at least this one's trying. Might have some bad modules, I suppose. Or bad configuration. Well, yeah, it doesn't like that. Interesting. I have some work to do. I'm making progress. I can reach every switch except the top one. It was a confluence of issues. I had to blast these with contact cleaner, like a lot, to get them to behave and blink like the others did. And then the GBIC ports on this switch were administratively down, meaning I had to go into the configuration and bring them up. But you can see it's happy. This is the final frontier here, so I don't know if you can tell, but that is green, meaning it's happy with this cable, but this one is not on yet. So I think it's the same issue. I'm going to go into the configuration and see if that is administratively down. Taking a look at that top switch, and I think it was a few things, but we got some spanning tree complaints, and then an unblock. Let's see if we can ping the retro rack. We can. I can reach everyone now. Let me explain. You can see on the top, port 7 is green. I think this GigaStack module is bad. I changed no configuration, and these two ports are configured the same in that they have no configuration applied to them. And I plugged this module in. You saw the spanning tree errors, but then it fixed itself, and now we're in. Yeah. I think this one is bad. That's okay. So much for the star configuration. These two are point-to-point. They have direct connections to the egg switch. And then this one GigaStack module is doing a lot of work. We're daisy chaining into here, 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 here. But I can talk to all the switches. They're all on the network now. This is a Windows XP VM on the same network. So we're looking at the egg1 web interface if you just hit that IP in a browser. So we're going to go to the web console, and it's running the cluster management suite from 2002. This hung me up last time. It's a Java app. This never loads. And I was watching my old video. I think I just pressed enter. maybe it'll load. Oh yeah. What's it see? It sees its original 3 switches. I think we can get into front panel view. Yes. We're getting closer. These are the 3 switches it already knew about. And now we need to add all the other ones to the cluster. So we do cluster, add to cluster, and it sees them all. A bunch of them have the same host name. Hopefully that's fine. Oh, no. That's my other guy. That's the one I just installed in the retro rack. I do not want. Well, yeah, I don't want him part of this. We're still missing a switch. Find out which one it is, I guess. Turn all these on. Who's missing? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm missing someone. I kind of don't care. This is good. This is good enough. Look how good this is. Also, it's interesting that switch I was having trouble with on the top, it does not know that a GigaStack module is in port 7, even though clearly I'm looking at it. So, yeah. Here's the Cisco cluster management suite. It's too good. I'll never get tired of looking at this. I think one of these Catalyst 3550 series are not showing up. There's 2 of them. Pretty sure it's this one right here that's not showing up for whatever reason. I didn't even check what version of iOS is on there or whatever. I can contact it. I can ping it though. So it's obviously it's on the network because it's part of the daisy chain. Well, that's goodbye for now to the GigaStack. Won't be the last time you see it, but it's probably the last time you'll see it GigaStacked for quite some time. I'll pull these switches out for various tasks, I'm sure. And they're just over on the shelf over there. Yeah, the end of an era, momentarily. Thanks for following along. It's going to be sad to even take this off the bench. I love how these things look. I love all the yellow GigaStack cables, the modules and everything. It's just such a interesting piece of networking history, and I'm glad I can revive it and be part of it. I'm on the road to 100,000 subscribers. I think I'm at 74,000 as of this filming. I'd really like to hit 100,000 by the end of the year. I need that plaque. And of course, if you really want to support the channel, I'm on Patreon. I post behind the scenes type videos, a bunch of IBM stuff, what I'm tinkering with, and that sort of thing. As always, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. I'll catch you in the next video.